Okay, welcome to the 2025 edition of Biomedical Engineering 6000. That's the course in systems physiology that focuses on the cardiovascular system. Welcome to you all. I hope you're back from the break and full of energy and hopefully caught up on your sleep at least a little bit and ready to make the most of this semester. We certainly intend to have a lot of fun this semester. Get a lot of cool things done, learn a lot, hopefully have, like I say, some real progress together. The class is growing every year, but still, I think, a manageable size. And the group we can work together with, we can all be in the same section, share discussions, and get to know each other. That's a big part of the goal for the course. The point of this lecture, which I'll also do in person, is just to give you a little bit of introduction to the class, a little bit of organizational background, and hopefully get us started on the right foot in terms of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. I think a great way to start thinking about this material, which of course is the real reason for the class, is to think about some scenarios you may have experienced in your own cardiovascular health. So we're all aware of our cardiovascular system. We all have some sense of our heart beating and our breathing, and we certainly know what happens when we cut ourselves and disrupt our normal blood flow. But have you ever pictured this scenario or had this scenario happen to you? More important, you've been sitting for a while, maybe you've been lying down after a workout or after some exercise, and you get up quickly. And right after you get up, you feel some dizziness, and in the extreme, if you ignore it, then you may even faint. And that's one of the interesting questions that we're going to try and address. It'll take a little while to get through all the material. There's a lot of pieces here that have to come together to explain this behavior. But if it's ever happened to you, by the end of the semester, you'll actually know why, and maybe even a little bit about what to do about it. Another one, and this is an example we'll use a lot through the semester because I think it's one we can associate with and can also teach us a lot, is what happens to our pressures, our blood pressures, when we're in different modes of standing, sitting, walking, exercising. We'll talk a bit about hydrostatic pressure and how that affects the pressure, let's say, on the blood at my feet when I'm just standing here talking to you, and how that situation changes quite dramatically when I start to walk around or run or exercise. And so we're going to think a lot about the effect of our activity level, our posture, on things like our blood pressure and ultimately, of course, with that blood flow. And that's going to be a feature we'll see in labs as well as in class. Then another case to think about is the heart transplant. You all have heard lots of these, but you got to wonder how this could possibly work. And I don't mean that from an immunological perspective. We all have learned something, at least over time, about the rejection response of a foreign body being introduced into the human body. We've read perhaps about the use of organs, whole organs, even from other animals, from pigs, let's say, in which we could harvest the heart and use that in a transplant situation. And a lot of the challenges there certainly have to do with the immune response. That's a big part of it. But I want to think more broadly about kind of the cardiovascular situation here. We all know something about nerves and heart and how they might talk to each other. The heart has a lot of control mechanisms. It knows when to speed up when we exercise, slow down when we relax. And how can that all function in the setting of a transplanted heart? When we take a heart from one human, or eventually an animal, and put it in another human, then that heart no longer has nervous system connections. It's just a piece of meat, really, a muscle hanging in our chest cavities. And how do we regain, or to what extent do we regain control over that organ when it's been transplanted into us? Now, these are all questions you may or may not have wondered about before, but hopefully they'll start you thinking about the kinds of approaches we're going to take in this class and why the class is called integrated or systems physiology, because physiology in its original sense, and I would argue most interesting sense, involves the convergence of lots of different systems that are driven by a number of different mechanisms. And that can be both the fascinating part and also the challenge of this domain. So these are the kinds of problems we can only really answer when we understand a lot of moving pieces and can tie them together. And there'll be particular questions that we'll use to frame this general conversation about, what might happen. Another question that has to do with control is, do you think you can lower your heart rate? If I told you right now, just sitting there, consciously lower your heart rate, how could you do that? I bet you'd be a little puzzled about what I was talking about, perhaps, but you certainly wouldn't instantly figure out what it is you could do to raise or lower your heart rate. You could say, sure, I'll exercise, my heart rate will go up, and we should obviously understand how that works. But how could we lower our heart rate other than, sitting, quietly? And there's been some ideas about this, that meditation can help us lower heart rates. There's various stories in history, more or less accurate, of yogis and meditation masters who've been able to consciously control the heart rate. There are a few mechanisms that we'll actually try out in the lab that we can use to change our heart rate. But we can only understand those once we understand all the various mechanisms. For example, do you know that splashing cold water on your face would lower your heart rate? It's a well-known response that has to do with diving, with the face going into the water. And we'll come back and cover some of these things. But so the body is full of these, I find them fascinating mechanisms for how we control our cardiovascular system. And to even understand those, like I say, we have a lot of moving pieces and a lot of bits and pieces to understand and figure out. So my goal in this class is to identify those pieces and put them into an integrated context. So sometimes we'll be focusing down on a specific behavior, of maybe even at the cellular level. But as much as possible, we'll be zooming back up to think about it as an integrated system and try and predict the behavior or explain the behaviors we see around us in terms of this integrated behavior. Some of the material in the class you hopefully have seen before in a more basic physiology class, maybe our own Biomedical Engineering 3202 class, and I'm going to build upon that. I'm not going to review that particularly or go over it all again. I'm going to assume you can get access to the materials, your notes. We have at least some of the textbook will be available for us online as an e-textbook, but you'll be able to go to those materials and get the basics under control so that we can build on that. That's the only way we can really ever build knowledge is to just start from a point that's above zero and move forward there. I want you to also learn to appreciate the cardiovascular system because it's the coolest, of course, but also to see that all of systems physiology share some of these common approaches, this idea of multiple mechanisms acting together in some kind of amazing harmony to achieve what physiology really is all about explaining, and that's this homeostatic state, this homeostasis, this maintenance of our bodies in a state, a collective integrated state that is well matched, if we're healthy, well matched to the conditions that we face. It's well matched to resting, it's well matched to exercise, it's well matched to being underwater or climbing a mountain or doing other things. And so it's an adaptable system, very flexible system, but really how does it work? And the cardiovascular system is just one example of all the various amazing physiological systems we have in our body. The final thing I want to help you build on has nothing to do with physiology. Well, maybe indirectly it does, but it has a lot to do with your ability to learn, to find curiosity, pursue that curiosity, to develop a certain let's call it perseverance, a certain determination and willingness to recognize that some things will take work and work applied over a certain period of time. These are not always topics or questions you're going to be able to quickly answer, look up in a book, ask ChatGPT to answer for you. they're going to be more complicated than that. And that takes a little more of what we know now, or at least what others have defined and called GRIT, G-R-I-T. It's not an acronym, it's just a word. And there's whole books written on this topic that describe how predictive an ability to pursue these long-term goals with perseverance, ultimately that ability is way more predictive of ultimate success than minor things like intelligence. So, and the good news is that we can develop a lot of these approaches as perseverance. It's not something that's hereditary necessarily. So we can build it and modify, and that's definitely one of the goals of this class, so that ultimately will put you in a place to be successful and also to be happy. So happiness is another interesting topic that will come up maybe throughout the semester, and has a lot to do with doing meaningful things, doing things that have purpose in our lives, and trying to recognize the value of the interactions we're going to enjoy with each other in this class. And so it'll be this balance between things that may seem a little sterile, of physiology and cellular mechanisms of heart rate control, but also very holistic in the sense that the relationships and the ability to learn from each other and share our experiences with each other is something also to develop, which is a skill that, again, will continue long beyond this class. I recognize you all have different interests, and as hard as it is for me to imagine, some of you are not quite so enthusiastic about the cardiovascular system as I might be. But I think I can instill in you some appreciation for values that go beyond this material. And we'll try and build on those as we go through the class. One of the themes that I think is inherently interesting in physiology and very useful in physiology is the idea of extreme physiology. So how does the body respond when it's pushed into extreme situations, whatever those might be? It could be climbing a mountain, something that we hopefully all know something about living here in Utah. Could be how our body responds to the unusual external pressures of being under the water. It could be how our bodies respond to being in microgravity conditions in space. These are all conditions of extreme physiology, which are not pathophysiology. That's a different category. These are not illnesses. These are just situations in which we crazy humans choose to put ourselves into, and it can be a fascinating space to learn about how the body responds and what the control mechanisms are and how they communicate with each other and how this all integrates into maintaining this homeostasis, again, that I mentioned before. So we're going to start right away by framing this conversation that we're going to have through the semester with a video, right? Let's watch a video to start with. This is one about a climbing expedition in 1996 on Everest, and it's a NOVA video, so it's well produced and has a lot of accuracy. The facts are mostly checked, and it also lays out a study in a sense. It has the format of a scientific report, and we'll try and view it in that setting so that we get an idea of like an introduction to the paper, which is the video documentary. We'll have a materials section or methods section describing the approach that the authors or the participants in the study used. And then we'll see some results, and then we'll see some discussion of those results. So it'll have very much the function of a scientific paper, but in a nice accessible format, and with a little bit of entertaining drama in the middle of it. So and the link to that is available on the website, and you'll be able to watch that. So another thing that helps us understand how we can kind of maximize the benefit of this class is to understand a little bit about you. And it would take a long time to get a full picture of all of you. We just frankly don't have time to go into all that detail in a class, but I'm going to ask you to fill out a survey, and from that survey, we'll hopefully glean a better sense of how we might direct certain topics or emphasize certain topics. So that'll be one of the tasks you'll have to do in this first week. Now, of course, your students, you care at least a little bit about your grades, and you want to do well. You want to come out of this class feeling like you got the most out of it and were able to perform well. So what are some of the tricks that you think might be helpful here to do well in this class? And in this setting of a video lecture, rather than give them all to you, going to turn this into an exercise and ask you to write down from your past experience, because you're all, you're seniors or grad students. You've been through lots of classes before. Write down some of the things you think worked for you in classes where you thought you nailed it, where you figured things out. What are some approaches that you found were effective? And at the same time, write down some that you tried but really didn't work all that well. And we'll start with that as a we'll come back to these topics through the semester, but I think that helps make it a little bit focused and conscious, make you aware of going into this class thinking, oh, that worked last time, I bet I could try it again, or that was a disaster when I tried it the last time, so I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to make that mistake again. And sometimes taking stock of this, which is not meant to build up our egos or destroy them, but just to be self-aware as to what each of us find to be effective strategies, because that will be different from person to person. And I don't want to prescribe them. I just want to encourage you to develop your own. And these are approaches that, again, would carry forward into lots of other classes that you may still be taking. So every class situation has expectations, fair game. You should know what I expect of you, and I should be at least willing to start by saying what I assume you expect of me, although I'm very open to hearing other suggestions of what else we can do for you to make this class worthwhile. I expect us all to try and stay organized. This course is as structured as I can make it, without being completely rigid. So I want to find a balance between, you knowing what's coming, you having dates, you having a schedule, you knowing what each assignment's about, you getting feedback on those in a timely manner. Those are all things that I think you have a reason to expect, that are all part of a structured interaction. And of course, it's all going to go through Canvas. You've all done this before. There's a syllabus on Canvas. It hopefully is finalized. It's almost inevitable that some small thing will come up, but I will try very, very hard never to change a syllabus once it's out there and once you have access to it. If you have questions about it, of course, get back to me. At least give it a brief read. I mean, I know it's syllabi are not the most enthralling reading, as much as we might try. The university has all kinds of expectations and requirements of things we have to include, blah, blah, blah. But I've tried really hard to lay this out in a way that's organized with lots of links you can follow. You can click on a table of contents link and find that topic. So it's kind of there as a handbook for the course as much as anything. So for heaven's sakes, don't memorize it, but at least understand how it's organized. Maybe read through the first bits and then get back to me with the questions that you might have. And as I say, we'll refer to it, we'll minimize the update of it. We will have a schedule. We do have a schedule, and that schedule is definitely going to adjust and adapt and change as time goes on. We could have everything from some fascinating topics we get off on and just decide to pursue more deeply, to a snow day where we have to postpone even a lab, and we'll have to figure out how to adjust to that. So the schedule is impossible to make really rigid. Of course, we don't, change it willy-nilly, but please check there again and again. Go back to the schedule. They're almost always they do automatically actually come with a date attached to them, so you can see when the schedule was updated and make sure you stay on top of the schedule. I have had students in the past take the schedule from the very first day of class, post it on their wall, and assume nothing would ever change, and then turned out missing a midterm or something because the class decided as a whole that they wanted to change it. So please stay on top of this. The grading is, you'll see it has many elements. I do that on purpose because I know that some of you are going to be amazing in writing an exam, and others are going to be terrified, or not terrified, but you're going to struggle with that. It's not going to be a fair representation of your knowledge. So we're going to have homeworks and lab reports, and then this term report, I'm calling it, and all these things will feed into a grade that, I hope is holistic as I can make it. And that's really the goal here, is to allow you to leverage those strong elements at the same time as you don't ignore the ones that you're not necessarily so great at, but maybe build on them without this horrible pressure of thinking that, oh my goodness, this exam is worth half my final grade. I I don't think that's the right way to do things. So again, lots of pieces, but that is done very consciously and with you and learning in mind. Now, you probably know by now, I've been doing this for a while, that I like to teach in what's called a flipped format. I didn't make this up. There are whole books on this topic. There are research articles on this topic in the world of pedagogy, literature, that pretty conclusively show that the learning outcomes are improved over a standard lecture. It will feel like more work on your part because you won't be able to come to lecture and veg out. You'll be coming to a discussion session where you'll be actively involved in a conversation, actively learning from each other with a little guidance from me along the way. And it turns out that, lots of good studies suggest that that really is one of the ways we can learn best. And that sitting, listening to me lecture, like I say, while it may feel easy, is probably the worst way to learn. Which of course is devastating as a professor sometimes to hear that, but I'm happy to respond with this flipped format. And so it will emphasize active learning. And if you've heard anything about contemporary education practices, you'll know that active learning is incredibly central and important to those approaches. So the key to doing well in that scenario is that you just have to keep up, which means keeping up with watching videos like this for the lectures, before the lectures. So you come to class prepared, also reading the sections in the textbook or other materials that you need. Otherwise, you're going to look a little bit stupid sitting there in the conversation, working with other peers who are kind of depending on you, like you're all depending on each other to come up with answers to questions and work through problems together. And if you don't come prepared, you can't possibly do that. So, so please do your very best to stay on top of things, and then we really will maximize the sessions we have together and get a lot out of them. And I can tell you that once the students figure this system out, the most are very happy with it and it works out fine for them. So, and again, this builds on the basis of active learning and also of peer learning, which means that I know you can teach each other, maybe even better than I can teach you. Once one of you have figured this out, you can share that perspective and that explanation with your fellow students, and oftentimes be more effective than I will be in explaining it. Sounds crazy, I know, but you really will be able to learn a lot from each other. So we want to build on that. That's why we're in this discussion room that we're in, and we sit around tables with boards, whiteboards, and we work things out. The organization otherwise is by module, just a way to organize content on a Canvas page, but it really is meant to lay out, for every week there's a module, so it hopefully will be simple to find your way through the class. I'll be tweaking, updating these modules as we go along through the semester, adapting, adjusting to your questions and topics that come up, and we'll push the material out well before the week starts. So you can read it through, be prepared, know what you have to do. Every module starts with a file that says, here's what we're going to do this week. And if you stay on top of those, read those, pursue those, you'll be doing just fine. Each of the discussion sessions will also have its own structure. They'll have some questions we want to address, some topics we want to work through. That again is just meant to allow you to come prepared and then to frame the discussions in some sensible way. Now, these are not rigid. We could go off, like I say, in some tangent. If a good question comes up, somebody has an interesting thought, we may or may not get through all the material that's nominally there in the discussion description. But I want you to know that we'll come prepared with something to do, and we'll just kind of see where it goes after that. There is a text behind this class, and I like it a lot because after, of course, using many different textbooks over many years of teaching, this one is very comprehensive. It is used in many medical school physiology classes, although physiology is not sort of a class per se anymore in a lot of medical programs. It becomes more of a reference book, in this case, to go to when you want to hear another explanation of something, when you want to kind of dig into a topic. Of course, you can find this material other places, but this particular Byrne and Levy textbook is in its 8th edition. It's a well-known and really very thorough and reasonably detailed explanation of the physiology we're going to deal with. It should be freely available to you electronically. If that doesn't work, let me know. We'll see if we can figure out what's going on. There are some other supplementary texts that I'm trying to get access to now. I hope to make at least part of the Silverthorne textbook available to you. That's the one that the undergrad class is based on, the 3202. That's a good place to go if you need to read your way back into this material, if you've forgotten some of the details, or if you're coming, especially if you're coming from another discipline or another program in which you haven't had this sort of background. This will be essential reading. And again, there are copies, physical copies available at the library, very cheap copies available online, used copies to get. There's really no reason not to have easy access to that book, especially if this is a new area for you. And then there'll be other materials that we see as we go through it. And you'll see that each of the Byrne and Levy chapters has these learning objectives. They can help sort of frame your reading so that you're not just linearly reading through the text assuming some of it will stick, but that you look at the objectives at the beginning and say, okay, I'm going to find the material that meets those objectives, because I'm going to also base a lot of my thinking and our explanation of this material on learning objectives. And they provide a really useful framework for how you get through material. Again, you read in a very focused way. You look for the material that explains or helps expand on that objective. And like I say, that makes for better teaching strategies all around. There are topics in the Byrne and Levy book that are explicitly clinical. There are some that are there kind of as extra topics available if you're interested. You're not all going to be equally interested in every part of the cardiovascular system. You can read those truly based on your own interests. And I won't, if I depend on those in some way for a test or for a homework assignment, you'll know it and be able to take advantage of that. And again, the reason for such a textbook is that no matter where you go in biomedical engineering, there's just a time in every new project where you kind of have to go back to the physiology and say, now how does that system work that I'm trying to build an interface for, or trying to do a diagnostic tool based on, or make a measurement from? So having a comprehensive book like Byrne and Levy around that and know how to navigate can really help you find that material you want at a useful level of detail. Again, I would argue more useful than you'll typically find doing Google searches that will ultimately take a lot longer. So having this sort of as your backbone reference book is hopefully going to be handy, for forever, literally. Now, we're big on labs in this class. It has an explicit lab section. We don't have labs every week. They're pretty intense events, so we try and space them out. This also gives you time to process the results, think about them, talk about them, summarize them in reports that we're going to ask you to write, all that good stuff. And you'll hear more about the details of the labs as we go along. The goal that we do try hard to pursue here that you may not know from other labs is that we want you to start thinking about designing your own experiments. It's obviously one thing that's useful to learn the equipment and the tools and the process involved in doing an experiment someone else designs for you, but that's not reality in most situations we're going to be in our careers. Instead, there's going to be a question we have to answer, and we're probably going to have to design the experiment, or at least parts of that experiment, to answer that question. So we're going to be building up to labs, a couple of labs like that, where you're going to be given a broad question and then going to have to figure out the design of the lab, what equipment to use, what measurements to make, how to analyze the data, all that stuff on your own. So that's really what we're building up to. So you come away with really, hopefully, useful, say marketable, if you want to think about it that way, skills that you really can take into your future. Because as I say, when you're an engineer in practice and working in a company somewhere, you'll work up a protocol as a group, but this part of the task is being able to work up a good protocol that will answer that question in a statistically and scientifically robust and rigorous way. So we want to help you learn some of those skills. And we'll be starting those labs, not this first week, but in the second week of class. And we'll spend some time on Friday going through some of the details about the labs. Again, you can check the schedule, find out when the labs are, and plan accordingly for those Friday afternoons where we'll have the labs. So what are the challenges in this class? What makes this class hard? For some of you, it'll be catching up. Some of you will not come with a great physiology background, or maybe not a great cardiovascular physiology background. Maybe you're coming from a materials background. Maybe you're coming from computer science. We have students from all over the place who've taken this class with great success, I would add. So there may be some catching up. And some of you, it's been a couple of years since you saw this material. So getting comfortable with this idea that it's kind of up to you to fill in the background here, and adapting to that, and either finding resources, using the ones we provide, or asking us for even more tips, catching up will be a problem. The other challenge with physiology is there's a lot of material, and some people say, oh, you have to memorize a lot in physiology. I'm not sure that's so true, because so much of physiology is about function, and that function is based on a set of physical and chemical principles that we'll use again and again. So in lots of ways, you'll be thinking about a new perspective, a new scenario, and there'll be a couple of facts to get you started, but then you're building on those facts in a way that is more, similar from specific subsystem to subsystem than it would seem. So try not to fall into the trap, I would even argue, that you can memorize your way through physiology. That's neither fun nor ultimately particularly useful as a way to think about a topic like this. So we'll deal with the fire hose and the huge amount of information by hopefully organizing it in a way that you see the patterns and can derive some of the important concepts as we go along. And of course, as in all things, you need to get access to the materials. For the catch-up part, that's where the Silverthorne textbook or other basic textbooks, there aren't none that I would say is any better than Silverthorne. There's no reason to look elsewhere that I can think of. But then, using the materials you have available. The other part is, and this is especially true if the book is comprehensive as Byrne and Levy, is that you're going to have to filter a little bit. And this is where we'll also try and help you. We're not here to learn every detail of every aspect of the cardiovascular system. That would take way more than one semester. So we're going to help you with kind of filtering this content a little bit so that the water blast is a little, controlled and constrained by the guidance and the focus we give you. And so when you're not sure of what's kind of central, let's say, to the material for this class, just ask and we'll do our best to guide you through that. So again, I have some expectations on you that I want to be really clear about. Obviously I want you to act like responsible adults. I'm going to give you, let's say, more leeway than I would my sophomore level class. You're at least a couple of years further along. You're hopefully here because you want to be here. This is not a required class. Arguably, it is a required class for PhD students in the cardiovascular track, but if you've chosen that track, this shouldn't be a topic of interest. I shouldn't have to convince you that the cardiovascular system is worth study. So like I say, I'm going to definitely treat you, as responsible adults and work on that basis. I'm going to assume you have some of that basic information under control. If not, you're going to get on top of it quickly and get up to speed with the basics. We're also going to be using MATLAB a lot. I haven't really switched to Python in any significant way, but we'd probably be open to some of these things being done in Python. That's something we can talk about as the semester goes on. But you need a computer language that you're comfortable with which to prepare data in a number of different forms, and we'll get into those details as we go along. So, access to a computer and a language that you're comfortable with is important. We assume you've had some experience writing lab reports. We'll try and be as clear as we can about what we're looking for in this class. So in fact, in the first lab, you're going to have the chance to revise and resubmit the lab report. We have a fairly big gap between the first two labs, so we can work out as many of these details as possible. I don't want lab report writing to become crazily burdensome. This should be something that, with the right tools and a little bit of organization, obviously will take its time, but should not, ruin your weekend, let's say. And we're going to work to make that as clear as we possibly can. I expect you to read the text. I expect you to watch the videos. For sure we'll throw in some other articles along the way besides what's in the textbook about particular topics. And I expect you to read those and be comfortable reading those. And again, reading them with purpose, reading them with some questions, some learning objectives to help you sort through all the content that you have. And mostly, I really expect you to participate. This is not a passive class. And I would argue life is not a passive process, and education is clearly not a passive process. So I want you to be motivated. I want you to be excited about this material. But at a minimum, I want you to be willing to talk and to risk saying some things that may not be correct. I mean, obviously, you won't consciously say things that are wrong, but I want you to be comfortable taking some risks, because if we can't toss ideas out, try things in a certain way, understand why that might not work or why it didn't work in some cases, and then revise and refine and try again, if we can't learn that process, then we're kind of stuck forever. Like, this is how engineering works. This is how science works. Nobody gets the perfect solution the first time around. I don't care if you're Da Vinci, and I'll even show you some examples where he screwed up. It really doesn't matter. We have to be risk takers, and to do that, we have to be respectful of each other and be willing to work together and understand ideas as they come out. Treat them as ideas, as something sort of abstract and objective that we can think through, talk through, evaluate, and decide, does that make sense or not make sense? So that's a really big part of the goals of this class. So we're going to deliver to you for all that. Again, this sort of middle layer, middle level of physiology, cardiovascular physiology. We're going to try and generalize that so you can use it in other systems that you see in the future. There are some general themes that emerge quite naturally in physiology, and we're going to emphasize those. The lab experiences and the lectures and the discussions and all that jazz will hopefully be well integrated. You'll be able to translate what you have learned in classroom and video into lab experiences and vice versa. We'll spend time discussing how the labs went and what you learned in the lab and where you got stuck in the lab and what kind of questions emerged in the lab. It should be a very highly integrated experience, and I'll be there for most of the labs. We have a TA who's going to be there for all the labs, so hopefully we'll be able to tie this all together really well. And again, in the labs, we're going to really emphasize the design aspects as well as the execution aspects. We're going to give you feedback that we hope is constructive. Always our goal is to be respectful and constructive. We assume you're here to get better, and we'll do our best through feedback to guide you along that. And we'll also be ready at any point along the way to answer the question that is a fair question for every student to ask in virtually every setting, is like, why should we care about this? Like, why is this topic relevant? Where does this fit into anything that anyone would care about? And of course, there's certain things you're going to care about more than others, but in my mind, in our minds, as we teach you, as we help you through this material, there's always a very clear sense of here's where this particular exercise or thought process fits into a bigger picture. And that picture also includes future career readiness. So we're not training you all to become future professors or to live in an ivory tower and be left to your own devices doing experiments or thinking about this. We're very aware of the skills needed to be successful as a biomedical engineer, and we're going to try and focus content on those as well. And again, we're going to give the opportunity, if you haven't had it before, to do peer learning, to encourage working together on things. We'll do our best to be available to help you throughout the course and be mentors in this case, be guides in this process. We have to talk a little bit about plagiarism. I think most of you by this stage understand what it means. There are some definitions, and you can see them on this particular slide. They come from a website that you can refer to for more explanation on this. And so, first question is, what is it? That's important, but it's really important to know why it's a really bad practice. It just sets you up for all kinds of problems immediately and in the future. In the immediate term, of course, it breaks the understanding that we have with each other. It goes against the law, if you will. I mean, we have guidelines in the department that you can also easily get access to that explain what sort of misconduct we're talking about when we're into this space. So I hope you'll be reasonable. I rarely have a problem with this as in the past. So, but what's really more important than any of that sort of legal mumbo jumbo stuff is the only thing that we have really in science and engineering that's worth building and worth preserving and is our metric of overall merit and respect in the community, because I think we all want to pursue a profession to the level that we gain respect for the quality of what we do, is through our reputation. So we develop reputations take years to develop, quite honestly, and they can be dismantled or destroyed in a heartbeat. And there are so many examples, and we can spend some time talking about those later, of notable scientists, even on our campus, who through either their own poor decision or maybe a poor decision of one of their trainees, have really had their careers substantially impacted when the truth came out that there'd been some cheating, some fraud going on, this sort of thing. And so it just I think makes the most sense to just establish this personal obligation to maintain the highest standards and to work with those going forward in our careers. Obviously, in a company situation, if we're cheating and using somebody else's data and not being true to our own results, and the consequences can be enormous, financial, in terms of people's health. We're putting people's health on the line here with some of these things. So just getting used to setting our own high standards is the kind of the best way forward. And of course, in our group, we're gonna get to know each other. We're gonna trust each other. Hopefully, we're gonna depend on each other. And I think we all want to have this confidence that we're all kind of working in a fair way. Nobody's cutting corners to get some advantage in terms of their grade. That just undermines trust and the ability that we have to work together effectively. So I hope you'll work with us on this. Now, I'm never sure where to bring up AI these days, AI methods, large language models, all that jazz. It does sometimes come up in the context of cheating. I really don't see it as by any means only or even primarily a vehicle for cheating. I see it as a tool set and an amazing capability that I want to help you become effective at using. So we're going to use AI in this class. I'll try and guide you where I think it can be useful and how it can be useful. And given how new it is and how we're all sort of feeling our way through this new landscape, we're gonna learn this together, and I'm gonna count on you to be giving feedback to me and the other people in the class as you explore certain things. So we're gonna use AI, and we're not gonna use just to write lab reports. I've tried that. The product is pretty terrible, quite honestly. But for example, it's a great tool if you want to know what's the typical structure of a lab report, what are the elements of a good lab report, what should I make sure to include. So those sort of topics are really usefully researched using an AI tool. It's much more effective than doing a simple Google search or web-based search. So we're definitely going to use it, and you'll hear lots more about it as the semester goes on. Our tool of choice, because it's free and it's available and it meets all the privacy concerns, is Copilot. And Copilot, as you know, is a Microsoft product, and it's really a sort of a wrapper around something similar to ChatGPT. So it's a reasonable tool, and it meets all the university requirements. So we can use this safely, legally, without any trouble from anybody. And if we have trouble, if we have problems, we have university resources we can call upon. So while you may have experience with other tools and you may indeed explore them, at least include Copilot as sort of the go-to or first choice maybe as you're trying some things out with these large language models. And so the balance between how we handle our peer learning, our interaction with each other, our talking with each other about how to solve problems, and outright copying of each other's results, or using Copilot to generate those results, or some other large language model to generate those results, that balance can be tricky. And my simple request is, if you are unsure about what the right balance point is, then just ask. We will be happy to work you through that and hopefully see you end up in a good place. That's really all the preparatory material. Lots more online, lots more on the Canvas page. Definitely spend some time checking that out. We'll see you on Friday in the discussion room for the first sort of structured discussion session. The requirement for that is that you watch the video. Again, check the Canvas page. It'll explain what the expectations are for this week. Watch the video, think about it a little bit in that structured way, and then come prepared to talk about it in the discussion. And then we'll just jump in and start learning to get to know each other, work together, and hopefully make the very best out of this semester. And if at any time you have questions about any of this, then never hesitate to contact me, either in person. I'll be there every day in the discussion sessions, or via email, whatever works for you. And I hope we have a really fun, healthy, and happy semester together. And I look forward to getting to know you all even better than I already know some of you. So take care. We'll see you soon.